just so we can make sure that it's working well.
He's
It goes
streaming
through
right
our
now.
comment.
So he is
Streaming right now.
streaming right now.
On YouTube.
Yeah, so it goes to YouTube and then it goes through the encoder. Back.
Yeah, okay, so just be cognizant of that it's live. Yeah, that's right. It picks up the microphones, yes. If there's one microphone on, it should hear the noise. If they're off, it should be okay.
Easy to talk to council and reverse.
Oh, it was on.
No, we turned it off.
Oh, okay. Can you hear everyone now, Councillor Appleton?
Hi.
Yeah, I can hear you all along.
Okay, it's not feeding through the mic, so. There. Okay, chatter is gone.
Is Sarah taking part in tonight's meeting at all?
Sarah is watching the webcast from home, and I'm just testing the links on our site to see if.
So do I mark her present then for the meeting on the minutes?
No, she's just. Okay, there it is. Great work, great.
All right.
You have coffee? I have coffee.
I'm a little bit jealous, not gonna lie. Is it like
It
everybody's?
is hard to find a Starbucks open at this hour.
Are they closed again?
Most of them close at 6, but I found one at, we have 7, I'm up in Hillside, so it's open at 7.
You're in Hillside?
Yeah.
Oh, your office.
My home. Up near Hillside. That's my closest Starbucks to my home.
Oh,
Right,
but you're
yeah.
still in Northern Bay.
I am.
Yeah, but Hillside would be the closest one for sure, yeah, yeah.
Wow. Hillside. Oh, no. You know, I used to have to pay for facials, but these are wonderful.
Voice great.
That's a spirit. Selena, is Councillor Moe taking part by phone?
No, Councillor Nick should be in here. I have not heard from her.
I hear the door right now. Oh, I forgot my change mask. It's so nice. I was so kind of.
I can't wear it. I don't wanna wear one that's white on the inside, cause my makeup will get all over it.
Oh, I know, on the inside.
Does that happen to you, Pat?
Imagine being on cover
Yeah.
and
Oh, keep it on still?
yeah.
Just until
See
Kevin
what the
tells us
mayor
to take it
decides.
off.
Oh, okay,
Kevin's gonna tell us.
Oh,
Okay.
So,
I'm ready.
We're gonna start the meeting and then once we get going, we'll take them
I'm
off.
so glad about Michigan.
Okay.
About, yes, me too. It all worked out for you.
It's a landslide.
I feel so sorry for my cousins and friends.
It's 7 o'clock.
Good evening, everyone. We are going to call this meeting to order. Now that everybody's in their seated positions, we're able to remove our masks to keep our safe distances. Those who wish to keep their masks on, I would encourage you to do so. We are obviously under stricter orders than ever for these few weeks under Dr. Henry's orders. I wanted to start by acknowledging that we're gathered here either in person or remotely on the traditional territories of the Coast and Strait Salish people, specifically the Lekwungen-speaking people known today as the Esquimalt and the Songhees First Nations, and that their connections to these lands continue to this day. And of course, we are live streaming this out through the web, and it's available on our website for future viewing if you wish to do so. I also just want to start by letting people know, if you're watching, that you can call in to the 250-598-3311 number. It's on the agenda if you wish to participate in the public participation period, which is item number 4 on the agenda. That number, 250-598-3311. First order of business on our agenda tonight is council and committee minutes. We have 2 from November 9th, 1 from November 16th.
Move receipt.
Move approval,
Move
I think is
approval.
yeah. Thank you. Moved and seconded for approval. Is there any discussion, changes? Not seeing. Councillor Appleton, anything?
No, thank you.
Okay, then I will call the question. All those in favor? Councillor Appleton?
Aye.
Thank you. Those are adopted. Then we have the advisory body minutes, and we have to approve these as well. Is that correct, or are these for receipt? Okay, thank
Move
you.
receipt.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any discussion, changes? Councillor Appleton, anything?
No, thank you.
All right, then. It's moved and seconded. I will call the question. All those in favor? Councillor Appleton?
Aye.
That passes. Thank you very much. And item number 3, mayor's remarks. Just a few short remarks. Just want to express my appreciation for what was a very different Remembrance Day ceremony. There's a lot of people involved in trying to pull that together. All the Remembrance Day committee, the faith leaders, Parks and Recreation, and engineering and public works staff. We had corporate services involved, police and fire, Oak Bay High School, and of course, many of the councillors were able to attend as well, often having to leave their families behind to do so. So thank you everybody for participating and supporting that. I also just want to get people know that the BIA has had to cancel their Christmas markets, but they will be doing a food drop-off in the front of the Municipal Hall starting on December 1st. So details to come, but just so everybody is aware that that is coming. I also just want to thank the BIA in general for bringing so much life into the village. They're doing everything they can to make sure that people still shop local, use local, and doing a lot of good work to promote our local business community and just encourage people to shop locally as well. And also just want to point out that with the that there is a new portal coming for all of our agendas and meeting minutes and so forth that's coming live sometime in the next 2 months, but we hope sooner rather than later. But it's really going to be a single point of contact for all of the minutes, and much more searchable, much more cohesive in terms of its access to information. And I guess I should just acknowledge that we are under new guidelines here under Dr. Henry's guidance. I'm just very thankful in our community that we have people being so supportive, and I really appreciate that people are wearing their masks where they're supposed to and giving people distance in public. So just want to express my appreciation to the community. I know it's tough, especially as we get closer to Christmas, to be socially isolated like this, but it's also very important. So what I've seen, I've been very heartened by, and I look forward to meeting people in person again one of these days. Up next, we have public participation period. As mentioned at the beginning, the phone number is 250-598-3311 if anybody wishes to call in to address council on anything of interest to the district. Is there any calls at this time? Okay, thank you, Ms. Williams. We'll just wait another 30 seconds or so in case people wish to call in. Again, if you wish to call in, 250-598-3311. I should probably just say that about multiple times during my mayor's remarks so people have more time to jump on the phones if they wish to. Not usually a very busy call in for the section at this time of year. Ms. Williams, has there been anybody calling in? Okay, thank you very much. We will move on to the next agenda items. If anybody calls in the next minute or so, if you could just wave at me and we'll happily jump back to let people have a chance. Up next on the agenda, item number 5, we have the request for additional driveway access at 1259 Oliver Street. We have a recommendation from Committee of the Whole, and I believe Ms. Jensen is on the line to answer any questions. Is that correct? I believe so. I will, are there any?
Your worship, we do have engineering and building and planning staff on the line.
Very good. Are there any questions of staff? No. Go ahead, Councillor Green.
I was going to move the motion, Your Worship.
You may do so. That would be great. Thank you. So this is the application for second driveway be approved. Is there any further discussion on this item? Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm sorry, I can't support the proposal, although I certainly share my colleagues' desire to save trees, but with the plan as it's presented, the existing garage doors for the property at 1259 are centered directly behind a mature oak tree located on Brighton. And the land proposed for the new driveway to 1249 could be the only alternative for access to parking at 1259 if there is a decision to have better access to a garage on that property. And if the proposed drive is used for development vehicles, and I presume that that would be the road in, Brighton is a narrow road, and the sharp turn into the driveway will make it difficult to maneuver. And again, it'll be directly across the path of that mature oak tree. I feel that the proposed long driveway and adjacent parking space will be awkward to navigate. And when I look at the driveways like this around the district that are being developed, generally the parking then goes onto the street and not onto the driveway, while we're taking green space out of the back areas of yards, and it sits there empty while the roads get loaded up. And the compliance with district restrictions for the driveway, because it's limited because of the amount of hard surfacing, compliance with district restrictions for the driveway will fall to the owner of the easement land, who does not benefit from the use of the proposed driveway, and where the resolution of that owner may be forced into what is generally the case, litigation. And also, there's no impact of installation of underground services yet that is determined by the plan. So for those reasons, I don't support the application as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Is there any other discussion or questions of council? Councillor Appleton, I'm just going to try and reach out to you directly just in case you're talking and it's on mute or something. So do you have anything to add?
No, Your Worship, thank you.
Thank you. So the motion is on the table. The motion is to approve the second driveway. Seeing no other comments, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Councillor Appleton?
Aye.
Any opposed? Councillor Patterson opposed. That passes. Thank you very much. And Councillor Patterson, I appreciate you raising your concerns in this forum as well. Next up is item number 6, is development application permit for 1476 Beach Drive. I think what we'll do is, since we are at council here, Councillor Green had the right idea. If we could just get a motion with a recommendation from the Committee of the Whole.
I'll move the recommendation.
This is all to approve the exterior alterations. Are there any questions or comments? Yep, thank you. Moved and seconded. Thank you. Is there any questions or comments? Nope. Councillor Appleton?
No, thank you, Your Worship.
Okay. Not seeing any. I will call the question. All those in favor? Councillor Appleton?
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. That passes. We have up next the Jack Wallace track update. Is there is Mr. Payne here to speak to this item?
Mr. Payne is available, Your Worship.
Mr. Payne, are you able to give a quick overview of this item? This has been a long time since it's been in front of us, and we have the report, but there's no sort of recommended motion here in terms of if we want to move this forward or not. And I have one piece of additional information as well I received from the president of the High School Alumni Association, who's looking at doing the fundraising as well. But Mr. Payne, are you on the line?
Yes, Your Worship. And since I'm the first member of staff, I get to be the one to test the volume. How's my volume?
It's actually quite good. We can hear you very clearly in the room.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I'll be brief. This item was presented during committee whole meetings of last year's budget deliberations, and council was asked if the district wanted to contribute towards the resurfacing of the running track at the school. And council deliberated and directed that staff bring it forward to council for consideration. Should council wish to contribute towards the track for next year, staff will integrate it into the 2021 draft financial plan and likely recommend a funding source from surplus, since the accumulated surplus reserve is a result of unanticipated budget surpluses, and this is an unanticipated expense. And our capital reserves could be used to fund this as well, but generally our capital reserves are used to fund assets that are within the district's control and ownership, and we've planned for the replacement of those assets. So staff would likely recommend the funding source to be accumulated surplus. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. And the update I just had, I can confirm that the funding that was put in place last year by the school district, the $108,000 that they set aside, is still being held, so they're still committed to that. So what isn't available is any other funding sources besides the municipality and then the fundraising effort. So they're looking currently, if we approve this, of about $100,000 of additional fundraising to fund the rest of the track. So that's the situation right now. I have Councillor Zelka and then Councillor Green.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to ask a quick question. I'm not sure whether staff can answer this, and I apologize for not preparing staff ahead of time for this question. The lands that Oak Bay High School sits on is a patchwork of lands, sort of partially owned by Oak Bay and partially owned by other entities. The curiosity I have is that the piece of land sitting underneath the track, does staff happen to know who owns that, or in whose title that lands happen to be on? And thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Mr. Payne, are you familiar with the primary area of, I think, lack of clarity is the parking lot, but I believe that, do you know currently whether or not the track area is completely clear that the title belongs to the school district?
Your Worship, I'm actually not clear. However, the reason why the district is part owners of the lands is really rooted in legislation and legislative change. I believe Victoria District has the same issue whereby the schools used to be run by the local governments long before the Municipal Act was enacted, before the School Act was enacted, and at that point, ownership of the land was basically taken over by the school districts. So in form, the school district owns and operates the land. In actual land titles, often you'll see the municipalities on there, but it doesn't really bear responsibilities for the ownership and operation of those lands.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Councillor Green?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Mr. Payne. I actually thought Mr. Payne said Queen Victoria had the same issue, but I realized he said the city of Victoria, and I was thinking, yes, we could be going that far back. Just a quick question. The wording is that school district number 61 for a district contribution of up to $50,000. Is it possible the amount could be less at the end of the day or not? Thank you.
Mr. Payne, the question is, the wording is up to, but are you familiar with whether there's any chance of this being less than the 50,000? I think that was originally there at the time because we were seeking additional grants from the provincial government and the Francophonie Games organization themselves and possibly the federal government. And I think the expectation at this point is those might be not coming, but I think that's the source of this word. But Mr. Payne, is there any indication at this point whether the amount could be different than 50,000?
Your Worship, if I were to to answer the question strictly, yeah, I mean, obviously, yes, the district can choose to provide a grant for the less amount. As to whether or not that would deter the ability for the district to proceed, the school district, pardon me, to proceed with the track resurfacing, I don't actually know the answer as to what impact that would have on the viability of the project going forward or not.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Green?
Yes, and I completely support the amount. I was just curious about the wording. Thank you very much.
Thank you. But that did trigger a wording question that I had, though, was, Mr. Payne, the wording that's there, is that sufficient if we just read that wording to move it forward? Or do you wish something a bit more solid in terms of actually saying, giving direction to include this money in the budget?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The wording is sufficient, and I envision that the school district would provide us with their contribution requests, and if it was up to $50,000, then that would be acceptable. As you mentioned, Your Worship, I believe the reason the wording was there was with the chance that the school district was able to have other funding sources from other levels of governments or contributions or donations that would thereby lower our contribution amount. It was there so we would have the flexibility to contribute less in that case.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
So I'm prepared to move a motion. Would you like me to do it exactly as it's written, or would you like me to augment it with that more strong words to definitely include it in the budget deliberations?
I personally prefer clearer language, but your call since you're making the motion.
Okay, I move that council provide direction to staff to include the request of the school district 61 for a district contribution of up to $50,000 towards resurfacing the running track at Oak Bay High School in the 2021 budget.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Appleton?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just really briefly, I guess, I'm not sure whether any staff are in a position to answer this, but do you have a sense of what the lifespan of this investment is if it's resurfaced? I mean, the report indicates that this was installed at the time of the Commonwealth Games and is now worn out, so that's 26 years. So I'm just kind of wondering what the timeline is on that.
Yeah, I believe it's around a 25 or 30 year surface lifespan is the expectation. I think it's past its expected lifespan now, so I guess that gives some indication.
The reason that I raise it is because I still feel that I feel like there's a missing piece here as far as a strategic plan for what happens with the pieces of property, as we discussed about ownership. You know, that there could very well be a different use of the collective lands that are made up by the works yard, municipal-owned land that has the track on it. There's no doubt that it's currently an amenity, but you know, I hesitate to invest in something that, you know, could potentially, you know, limit. I don't think that's going to be happening on the time frame necessarily that this thing would be around, that the surface would last. But that's why I'm curious.
Yeah, I can just answer that question about its expected lifespan. I can't speak to the future plans from the school district of that land. Although obviously, if they want that track being resurfaced, they obviously see that as being used for the next 25 years. Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Any other discussion? Not seeing any. We have a motion on the table. I will call the question then. All those in favor? Councillor Appleton?
Aye.
All right, that passes. Thank you very much. And I look forward to having a jog around that track at some point in the future. Item number 8, the provisional 2021 Parks, Recreation and Culture budget. I believe we have Mr. Herman and Mr. Payne on the phone to answer any questions. I'm not sure who's doing a quick overview of this. Is it Mr. Herman that would give the introduction?
I believe it'll be Mr. Payne, Your Worship.
Okay, then. Well, welcome back, Mr. Payne, our Director of Financial Services, to give a quick overview of the Parks and Rec provisional budget.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. And the purpose of this report is twofold. Despite its name, the purpose of the report isn't really to discuss in detail the provisional Parks, Rec and Culture budget. Nevertheless, that is certainly being discussed tonight. And really the second is to recommend the use of the COVID-19 Restart Grant. So get some input from council on the use of that grant. So the Parks, Rec, and Culture staff, alongside financial services, has prepared the 2021 provisional budget. And this provisional budget indicates a $4.1 million decline in revenue and a $1.7 million decline in expenses for a net funding shortfall of $2.4 million. Every effort has been made to provide the current services in the most cost-effective way. But you can see by the detailed schedules in the report that over half of this funding shortfall is really due to aquatics and fitness, which have had heavy capacity limitations placed on those services. So council can choose from many options to in regards to the funding shortfall for 2021. The district can use some reserves or surpluses. The district can increase taxes, or the district can utilize already envisioned tax increases. For instance, we had some tax increases we were going to use for infrastructure funding to increase sustainable infrastructure funding or other increases. Or staff could utilize, the district could utilize existing reserve transfer budgets. So we're already setting aside over $7 million annually in our reserves. We could utilize some of that funding temporarily until things rebound after COVID-19. Or lastly, the district can utilize the COVID-19 Restart Grant that the district is now in receipt of to fund some of the shortfall. And council has flexibility in those options. They can use any or all of those options to any degree. So the second thing I wanted to talk about that's in this report is the COVID-19 Restart Grant. And council will bear with me. I have a little bit of a prelude, which I thought was pertinent information, which kind of highlights the genesis of the COVID-19 Restart Grant. I had the pleasure of attending an economic conference virtually this year, and the keynote speaker was Dr. Ben Bernanke, who was the chairman of the Federal Reserve in the U.S. during the last major recession, 2008 onward. And he said that the federal government at the time, speaking of the U.S. federal government, did a good job of stimulating the economy with fiscal policy, basically fiscal stimulus. But where the government fell short was really at the state and local government level, because there was a lot of balanced budget legislation. And as a result, state and local governments had to cut budgets. They had to cut services in order to have a balanced budget. And much of the gains from the federal fiscal policy was offset in that way. And so, the economic leaders at the time, they sort of learned from that, and that's part of the reason why you see this COVID-19 Restart Grant from the federal and provincial government this year. In September, the provincial government, alongside the federal government, announced that there would be $425 million in support for local governments. And in November 3rd, while this report was being prepared, we received notification that we would be the recipient of a grant in the amount of $3.6 million. And I can confirm that that grant was sent to us just last week. So we have that funding available. That grant can be used for revenue shortfalls. It can be used for facility reopening, emergency plans, bylaw enforcement, and other costs related to COVID-19. So it certainly fits the purpose of the funding shortfall that is forecasted for 2021 at the Parks, Rec, and Culture Department. So as a result, staff are recommending that the district use $2.4 million of the COVID-19 Restart Grant to support 2021 PRC operations, Parks, Rec, and Culture operations, and that the remaining $1.2 million from that grant be set aside in a financial stability reserve that can be used to fund potential 2022 revenue shortfalls from the PRC or elsewhere in the district. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. Are there questions? Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you to staff. I thank Mr. Payne also for his diligence in maneuvering us through the financial challenges of a very unusual year. So I think we appreciate it both in the Q3 reporting and certainly in this overview, and also the Parks and Rec staff who have done a very good job at maneuvering an extremely difficult time also. On the presentation, a couple of quick questions. On page 3, you talked about a cumulative budget surplus of $2.6 million. Is that comprised of both financial and non-financial assets? And if it is a combination of both, maybe if you could just tell us what is financial versus non-financial?
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Mr. Payne?
Sorry, Your Worship, I'm going to have to ask Councillor Patterson if you wouldn't mind repeating the question. I'm sorry, I'm struggling to understand what part of the report you're referring to. Thank you.
On page 3 of your report, you talk about the cumulative
Councillor Patterson, can you just speak up or move a little closer, speak up a bit? Does this help?
Yes, thank you. On page 3 of your report, talk about the cumulative budget surplus that was accumulated for Parks,
yes.
Rec, and Culture. So if you could just perhaps provide information on whether that's both financial and non-financial, and if it's a combination of both, approximately maybe percentage-wise, if not an exact amount of how much of it is financial.
Thank you, Councillor
Yes,
Patterson.
okay.
Go ahead,
Thank
Go ahead,
you,
Mr.
Your
Payne.
Yes, that's quite helpful. Just to clarify, the accumulated budget surplus is up to 2019 was 2.6 million. This year, the budget deficit was $1.9 million. So up to we're anticipating it to be $1.9 million. So at the end of 2020, overall, since 2011, the Parks, Rec, and Culture budget deficit is expected to be about $700,000. And to answer your question, yes, it's 100% financial assets. The Parks, Rec, and Culture budget in and of itself doesn't take into account non-financial assets such as tangible capital assets. That's dealt with really largely in a different section of the budget. The operating department budgets are typically 100% financial assets. Thank you for asking that question.
Thank you for that clarification. And Mayor, if I could just continue.
Go ahead.
In the report, you outline a number of options for council to consider. Most of this, of course, is directed at Parks, Rec, and Culture, which is understandable. Are there any alternative considerations that council should be looking at in addition to this? And perhaps if you could also just speak about how the balance of the funds that are not used as proposed here will be allocated for future use. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Go ahead, Mr. Payne.
Thank you, Your Worship. The options that are presented in the options section of the report, I would argue, are actually corporate-wide. For instance, use of the result, it impacts the Parks, Rec, and Culture budget, absolutely. But the actions themselves, I would suggest are corporate. So, for instance, using the district's accumulated surplus reserve, certainly that's a district-wide resource. So it really impacts the district's resources as a whole. Tax increase, certainly that tax increase would be dedicated to the PRC, but that revenue would be the entire tax base. Infrastructure replacement, generally, we've increased over the years our infrastructure replacement transfer to reserve budget, admirably, I would argue, and it's for a reserve that is undedicated, meaning it's just general infrastructure replacement. So the infrastructure that can be replaced from that reserve, again, corporate-wide, could be facilities in PRC or facilities elsewhere, could be pavement, could be equipment. So again, I would say it's more corporate-wide. So hopefully that answers your question, Councillor Patterson.
It does. I believe that what I heard from Mr. Payne too is that he has consulted with the various departments of the district, and collectively this is the most recommended application of the funds that we've received.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Are there other questions of Mr. Payne? I just have a question. Well, actually, I'll go to Councillor Appleton. Did you have anything?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to clarify in the recommendations, there are the two parts. Firstly, to utilize 2.4 million towards the 2021 budget, and then referring to the financial stability reserve to address future funding shortfalls. The recommendation refers to just future funding shortfalls generally, and then later on in the same report it refers to Parks, Rec, and Culture shortfall. So I'm just wanting to establish, is the recommendation centered around a financial reserve specifically for Parks, Rec, and Culture, or just for a financial stability reserve related to funding shortfalls more broadly?
Mr. Payne, could you understand the question?
Absolutely. Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Appleton, an excellent question. The recommendation is that the remaining $1.2 million be transferred to a financial stability reserve, and that could be used to address shortfalls, again, district-wide. If you ask me what the chances are that the leadership team would recommend and what we will probably incur, it would probably be directed again in 2022 if needed to the Parks, Rec, and Culture budget. However, that should that forecast picture change and another department we believe would be appropriately used of those funds, this recommendation would allow us to use it for other departments or other revenue shortfalls throughout the entire district.
Thank you, Mr.
Payne. And I appreciate that, because that's exactly the gist of my question is that I can understand that subsequent to 2021, it may very well be that Parks, Rec, and Culture may still incur shortfalls, and that may be the most logical way to use that. But then unexpectedly, unanticipated revenue shortfalls in another area, it would be nice to be able to use those there as well. So just a quick follow-up, if I could, Your Worship.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask the question that, are we aware if we set aside those funds into that reserve, I'm going to assume that we are then allowed to retain that reserve, as in that grant would be considered dispersed. We don't have to disperse the remainder of those funds on a specific timeline. It's sort of a one-time grant that doesn't have anything associated with it like that.
Mr. Payne, in terms of the actual mechanism of applying this grant, are you aware of what the limitations are?
Through Your Worship, yes, and really an excellent question. This grant appears to be broad enough, applicable enough, such that we've consulted our auditors, and they're seeking some advice on a consolidated way from their colleagues across the province. But all indication is that this is an unrestricted grant because the use of the funds are quite broad. So the district has great discretion in how it can use it. Mind you, the ministry has indicated in the letter to us that the funds will have to be reported in a schedule to our audited financial statements. So the use of those funds will have to be reported. The question remains, suppose that after 2022, the district still has some funds. What sort of expenses can it be used for? I anticipate that's not going to be a question that's going to be of much relevance to the district. I think there's sufficient COVID-19 related impacts to our budget such that we'll be able to use those funds and then some. However, that's something that we'll monitor closely, and we'll report back if there's any indication from the ministry of a restriction on the future use of those funds.
Thank you. Councillor Appleton, anything else?
No, thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. I guess I would just make a comment, which I probably shouldn't do at this point, but my thinking on that Parks and Recreation, or the reserve fund, really relates mostly to Parks, Rec, and Culture. And we've had these surpluses that have gone into general surpluses, and I think the more clarity we have for that, the better, because I think that's the one area of revenue that we have the most risk on. And the reason that they run surpluses is that they've had to budget fairly conservatively to allow for changes that happen unexpectedly. I have just a couple quick questions. Do we have any? I know we have a projected budget for 2020. with these new changes that are happening with the public health orders, are we expecting any significant shift in the anticipated deficit in this year from the 1.4 to 1.9 million? Mr. Payne?
Your worship, I believe Director Herman's on the line and indicated that he's willing to answer that question.
So go ahead, Mr. Herman.
Thank you, Your Worship. Can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. The staff are still working through and actually anticipating some further guidelines to come from the province. What's come so far last week has not had significant impact, some, but not to a large scale. There's supposed to be some additional guidelines coming that will impact potentially a greater number of programs, but we're still waiting to hear and actually have heard that we might not get that information for a week or two yet. Such things as, that may impact the fitness area. Physical distancing might be increased from 2 meters to a greater number, things like that. So it's difficult to say, but I'm also hopeful that the first bit of the fall here has been successful enough that it might offset what might come in the latter part of the fall, if that makes any sense.
That's good. I don't want to put you on the spot for. No, that sounds good. Thank you, Mr. Herman. I didn't want to put you on the spot too much. I just was curious if there was if you anticipate any significant shifts. So that's helpful. And the other question I have really is to Mr. Payne is if I'm just curious in the wording of the COVID related expenses, we have a deficit this year. We're using other sources to fund that in terms of surpluses and deferred, payments into reserves, et cetera. But this is a very clear, that payment for Parks and Rec seems very clear that we qualify for it. And I'm just wondering if there's any logic in using some of that money to pay for the deficit in 2020 and some of the money for the anticipated deficit in 2021, recognizing it probably won't cover all of those costs, but we can still, if we run into the issue of having a revenue shortfall in 2021, be able to pay it from surplus. And that would just take away the risk of them saying, well, you haven't spent it, so they'll take it back again. I'm not sure if that's a logical course of action or if that's just reading too much into the openness of the grant wording.
Your Worship, it's a perfect suggestion because it depends the accounting treatment. I don't want to get too technical, but if the accounting treatment ends up being what we expect, which is this is an unrestricted grant, and we got the money last week, which means it will all go into this year's surplus as revenue this year, which means that our surplus would grow. So it makes sense to allocate on the books and in the accounting, in the financial statements, which would free up the surplus that would not otherwise be there to use. So we could utilize those grants and ensure that we've used it for purposes which it was set out for, and we would have other financial resources available in an equal and opposite manner.
Okay.
So yes, thank you, Your Worship. Staff will take that under advisement.
Okay. Is there any changes to the wording that you need at this point in the motion that's suggested? Because it really just speaks to the 2021 budget, or can you work within that and come back if there's any changes in direction required?
Your Worship, I'm going to have a think about that if you don't mind. Again, it really does come back to whether or not what the accounting treatment for it, even though the financial impact to the district is six of one, half a dozen of the other. I'm I'm gonna have to have a think about that if you don't mind. Thank you.
Sure, and my apologies. This is a thought I had sitting here, and I would have given you some time otherwise. I think we're safe to make the motion as it stands, and we can always come back to it if we need more direction to use this year's, some of the money for this year's deficit as well. Thank you, though, Mr. Payne. Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mayor. And out of your questions, I guess there's another one. It generates another question for me, and I don't want to go too far down the path here because we can start to get too much into budget discussions and deviate from the real matter before us here. But this is, of course, an unusual amount of funding that is coming into the community, and there will be some that is carried forward. And I do trust that there will be some sort of flag notes then in the financial reporting so that we partition this from what would be our normal revenues and expenses. It's just to identify that it is an unusual circumstance, because as time goes on and some of us may or may not be at the table, other people will wonder, well, why did the revenue drop in future years? So I trust that is something that you're very diligent, so I trust that you'll be clarifying that in future statements, but I'm just checking to ensure that happens.
Okay, thank you. I'll take it as a rhetorical question, Councillor Patterson. Thank you. So if I'll go back to the table here, go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
I'm happy to move the recommendation. Do I have to say it all? There's quite a lot of it there. Or should I just say as per the staff recommendation? Our option 4.
I don't have the here I do.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll move the recommendation as per the staff report of option 4 to utilize the COVID-19 Safe Restart Grant funding. Towards the to
There's
fund
actually just in the agenda itself. There's a
that's the one you'd like me to read? Okay.
Yeah, that's, if you don't mind, just read that one out.
Okay.
That's the clearest.
I move that the recommended report titled Provisional 2021 Parks, Recreation and Culture Provisional Budget, authored by the District Director of Finance and dated November 23rd, 2020, be received, and that Council direct staff to utilize 2.4 million of the COVID-19 Safe Restart Grant to fund the 2021 Parks, Recreation and Culture budget, and further, that the remaining balance of the COVID-19 Safe Restart Grant funding be set aside in a financial stability reserve to address future funding shortfalls related to COVID-19.
Thank you. Is there a second? Seconded. Thank you. Any further discussion on this item? Councillor Appleton, anything else?
No, thank you, Worship.
Okay. Not seeing any further discussion. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Councillor Appleton?
Aye.
Thank you. That passes. And on to item number 9 on the agenda, we have new business and verbal reports. Is there any new business here tonight? Okay, I don't see any. Report on the Capital Regional District. I just want to congratulate the chair of reinstated chair of the CRD, Chair Plant. There's a new vice chair in Director Mercereau from the District of Saanich. Director Helps and Screech form the chair and vice chair of the Housing Corporation again, and Director Blackwell and Plant as the chair and vice chair of the Hospital District again. No changes there. The meeting there was tied up largely with operational election and type things, so there's nothing much new to add on the CRD front. But I will add, since I just have the floor here, and we'll go to other verbal reports, I also just wanted to say I was at the BC Association of Police Boards, and there's just ramping up there some work to try and work with the province on their Police Act review process. So that work is underway at this point. But with that, are there any other verbal reports from other committees, commissions? Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mayor. We held our Zoom CREST board meeting on November 18th and extended our thanks to Gordy Logan, who is stepping down as the longest-serving director and chair of CREST, and Kiara Kahakawila was elected the chair of the CREST, so she begins her 4-year term, effective immediately. And at the meeting, we also approved our 2021 budget and the 5-year financial plan.
Very good, thank you. Councillor Braithwaite?
Thank you. Just, I also needed to pass along a thank you from the South Island Prosperity Partnership to everyone who participated in their Rising Tide online session last week. It was very successful, so I hope any of you who participated got something out of it and that you enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other verbal reports? Councillor Appleton, anything?
No, thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Up then next is just the, item number 10 is the resolutions notice. Oh, sorry, Councillor Patterson, go ahead.
Sorry, I better not forget this one. It's most important. But the Oak Bay Heritage Foundation held their annual general meeting on November the 10th. And I'm very pleased to inform everyone that our president, Robert Taylor, was re-elected president and will continue to serve. But we have a new vice president of the Oak Bay Heritage Foundation. Britta Harrison-Brook will continue her work with the Heritage Foundation and serve as our new vice president. Jane Hall will be the secretary, and Bronwyn Taylor will be the treasurer. So I take pleasure in thanking them for their continued service to the Oak Bay Heritage Foundation and look forward to working with them in the coming year. I should also add that they did also approve their new policy manual, and as soon as the minutes are approved, I will get that over to the hall. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Patterson. Item number 10 on the agenda, we have the resolution notice. These are the recommendations from Committee of the Whole. So we can just move all of those together, and we can separate them if anybody wishes to discuss any. Go ahead, Councillor Green.
Sorry. I'm happy to make the motion.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Move.
And would you like me to read it all?
No, we don't have to read it out. It's fine. It's in the, and it's very clear from the Committee of the Whole, so it's fine.
Okay, thank you. So I will move the resolution as it's set out.
Okay, thank you. If you just turn off your microphone, we'll get a seconder.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Thank you very much. Is there any discussion on these? Councillor, oh, go ahead, Councillor Green.
Very briefly, I would just like to, through you, thank staff and particularly Ms. Williams for wrangling this one to the ground and for making the changes that we requested over time. I know it's been a lot of work, but I just want to say thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Councillor Appleton, anything on this, on these recommendations from the Committee of the Whole?
No, thank you, Your Worship.
Okay. Seeing no other discussion, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you. Item number 11 on the agenda. We get into honest to goodness council work where we're making bylaws and changes. Item number 11 is zoning amendment 38 at 1538 Monterey Avenue. I think just out of formality here, I'll just ask staff to give a quick overview of each item as it comes up. Mr. Anderson or Ms. Jensen?
Thank you, Your Worship. So just as a reminder, Committee of the Whole considered this at their meeting last Wednesday. The zoning amendment proposal is specific to the property at 1538 Monterey Avenue. It is one of two properties for which the district has entered into lease agreements for refugee housing with the Victoria Immigrant and Refugee Center Society. The society is proposing to use the Monterey home for a mix of refugees, which could include couples, individuals, or single parents, up to a maximum of 8 people. But in order to do that, a zoning amendment is required that would allow for housing of additional unrelated individuals and the related support systems, including an on-site caretaker and education programs that would help integrate the new refugees into the community. So the proposed zoning amendment does not change the zoning of the property from the current S5, which is the RS5 zone for one family residential use. What it does do is introduce a site-specific zoning amendment that would be for this property only, which would provide for the congregate housing permitted up to a maximum of 8 persons and 2 domestic staff. So should council give the bylaw first and second readings tonight, a public hearing would be scheduled for January 14th next year, 2021. And at that, staff are requesting council direction.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jensen. I think it's appropriate to have first and second reading, and we can have debate. Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
As mentioned in the agenda, I'd like to move that council consider the site-specific zoning to permit congregate housing at 1538 Monterey Avenue and give first and second reading to zoning amendment bylaw 2020, number as mentioned. Do you want this B as well?
Just the first part. But if you could read out the number for the record as well.
3531.105.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Is there a seconder?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Thank you very much. Is there any discussion on this item? Councillor Appleton?
No, thank you, Your Worship.
All right, I'm not seeing. Oh, Councillor Zelka, go ahead.
Through you, I just wanted to thank staff for moving forward on this as quickly as they have, and brought it forward as quickly to allow Verks to move forward. They are ready to bring people into the building. So the faster we can do this, the faster that the building can be used to capacity. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. I'm not seeing any other discussion. I will call the question. All those in favor? Councillor Appleton?
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. Thank you. So first and second reading is completed. And with that, we need to set a public hearing date. Can I get a motion to set the public hearing date for January 14th?
Gladly. The B portion, to set a public hearing date for bylaw number 3531.105 to be held at the Oak Bay Municipal Hall on January 14th, 2021, 7 p.m. in council chambers, and that notice be given in accordance with the Local Government Act.
Moved and seconded. Is there any? You can ask a question. Absolutely. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you. Just wondering what happens if we are still under lockdown on that date? Then how do we handle a public hearing?
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. Ms. Williams?
Thank you, Your Worship. Staff is currently in the planning stages of developing a process to hold a virtual public hearing. They have been held in that method, that format around the Lower Island, so we've got a lot of experience to draw from.
Thank you. Not seeing any, and thank you very much. We'll leave it at that then. I'm not seeing any other questions. We'll call the question. All those in favor? Councillor Appleton?
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. Thank you. Under number 12, sewer use charge bylaw. I don't believe we need to have any input, but I'll take questions after we get after we give first two readings.
I'll move that council give the first two readings to the sewer user charge bylaw number 4392-2008 or 2008, amendment bylaw number 4776-2020.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Are there any questions of staff on this or any comments that you wish to make? Councillor Appleton?
No, thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, I don't see any other. Okay, I don't see any, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Appleton?
Aye.
Thank you. And we get third reading.
I'll move third reading of same.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Councillor Appleton?
Aye.
Thank you. That passes. Thank you very much, everyone. Item number, refuse collection and disposal bylaw. We've had first, second, and third reading at a prior meeting, so we just need a motion to adopt.
Move adoption of the refuse collection and disposal bylaw number 4731, amendment bylaw number 4773-2020.
Second.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Usually an adoption. Councillor Appleton?
No, thank you, Your Worship.
All right, then I will call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Appleton?
Aye.
Thank you. And number 14, water rate bylaw.
I move that council adopt the water rate bylaw number 3717-1981, amendment bylaw number 4774-2020.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? I'm not seeing any then. I will call the question. All those in favor? Councillor Appleton?
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. That passes. We have item number 15, council procedure bylaw.
I'll move that the memorandum from the Director of Corporate Services introducing Council Procedure Bylaw number 4740/2020 for consideration of readings be received for information, and that Council Procedure Bylaw number 4740/2020 be given first and second readings.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Thank you very much. Any discussion, questions at this time? Councillor Zelka.
Thank you very much, Chair, and through you to staff. Thank you so much for the report and for the changes that were made as a result of some of the discussions that came out of the Committee of the Whole meeting last. I did want to ask a question related to a companion document that this document makes reference to, in particular the agenda guidelines. One of the comments that I brought forward last time had to do with the posting of the agendas up on the website. And I was told that, and I just want to confirm with staff, this is still the case, that the agenda guidelines would most likely indicate where and how this would be done. So I pulled up a copy of the agenda guidelines, which a copy of was made available at the previous meeting, but not today's meeting. It's confusing to me. So I'm hoping that it would be, since the guidelines are at the discretion of the Ms. Varela, I was hoping that she could possibly explain the potential discrepancies in there, or maybe I should just take that offline.
Well, so I think probably a detailed discussion, probably better offline since it's not in our agenda package, but I'm happy to. I mean, obviously the goal here is to make it as clear as possible, because if members of council aren't clear, then probably members of the public wouldn't be either. So,
shall I just point out in general what appears to be an inconsistency to me with
please,
respect
that would
to
be helpful.
Okay, so in the agenda publication guidelines from the Committee of the Whole last week, in the purpose, it talks about how the agendas will be posted. A copy of the agendas will be posted at the public notice posting places defined in today's bylaw. Yes. However, later on in the agenda publication guidelines, towards the bottom, it says they will be posted at the front and rear entrances, on the public notice board, at the website, and the administrative counter as well. So there appears to be an inconsistency in that document that I was hoping could at least be cleared up or made fairly clear, so that the top didn't appear to contradict the bottom.
Sure, thank you. And Ms. Varela, you can address that now if you wish.
Thank you, Your Worship. So certainly if there is a discrepancy in the document, staff will address that. The intention is that we do meet the legislated obligations for posting, and the intention is also to get it on the website as appropriate. So again, I think staff can stand strong in its efforts to date to make sure things are out well in advance of how they have historically been done. We've made advancements with that. Certainly the website's getting friendlier all the time. Staff are taking great strides to make that information more accessible, so we continue building on that. And the operational guidelines that are those companion documents, staff will seek to perfect those before final adoption. But thank you for pointing that out, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you, Ms. Varela. Can I just make one point? I think what I heard from Councillor Zelka, what I heard was there's a reference to the legislative requirements at one point, and then the aspirational goals later. So maybe if it's just a bit more clear that those are the two definitions, that would probably help in that document. Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you very much, Chair. I also did want to take this opportunity to thank staff for how much better the whole posting of the agenda process is. I can recall 4 or 5 years ago, we would get 24 hours at most to see 24 working hours at most to see the public and council before we would have to somehow digest it all. And now this is all being posted not on the Friday late, but on the Wednesday beforehand. So it's absolutely wonderful to have the lead time. And I'm hearing compliments. It's not me, it's all of the staff. So thank you so much for that. I did also want to say that I've noticed, and others have noticed, oakbay.civicweb.net, which is where all of our documents are posted. Maybe because our Director of Financial Services came from Central Sandwich originally, those tools, those iCompass tools, are now being used to good effect. And a feature that they had pressed into service, I see we have now pressed into service. So we actually have, if anyone goes to that web address, as I mentioned, where all the documents are, it actually looks beautiful. It actually looks like it's a website. It actually appears friendly and inviting. It's not like it was before. So I just wanted to say it's been noticed, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Zilk. I know a lot of that is Ms. Williams and other administrative staff as well. So thank you for that work that's going on. I know it's getting better all the time as well, which is even more exciting. We have a first and second reading on the table here. Any other discussion? Councillor Appleton, anything?
No, thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Then I will call the question. All those in favor? Councillor Appleton?
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. Thank you. And can I get third reading?
I'll move third reading of the council procedure bylaw number 4740, 2020.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. All those in favor? Councillor Appleton?
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. That passes.
Move adjournment.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Councillor Appleton?
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned. Oh, that's a shame. We're 50 seconds past the 1 hour mark. We could have almost slipped underneath the 1 hour. All right, thank you, everyone. Good evening. I hope we're meeting in person again on December 7th, but we'll see if there's what happens with the public health guidelines. We'll see how things go. Thank you very much.
Not at all. Thank you.
Participant exiting.
Andrew?